Well, thank you very much, Jamie, for hosting a wonderful panel, and to our panelists, and of course to Gilberto for a wonderful performance. With the rising cost of Zeitgeist this year, we figured we'd try and find multi-talented speakers who could fill in for entertainment. So this was your entertainment for the evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is hard to top off a day like this where we started with the Prime Minister and we had Queen Rania and a whole host of wonderful people during the day as speakers. And I did say there was nobody from Google, but I guess I wasn't accurate. There will be somebody from Google. I'm going to invite our Chairman and CEO, Dr. Eric Schmidt, to come please take the stage. And he has a special surprise for us.
Thank you, Nikesh. Thank you. That panel and the minister reminds us why we're alive. It's so great that you were here, and so great that we could do this, and so great for you all to spend your whole day and tomorrow with us as well. As a quick summary of Google, in the last year, since we were here last year, we talked about search, lots and lots of search improvements, lots of new products in the search, lots of interesting and unanswered questions about search that we're working on. Advertising, many more advertising technologies, many more advertising ideas, much deeper, much more powerful notions of how to get advertising messages to consumers, and of course the acquisition of DoubleClick. The emergence of a new whole strategy for Google involving applications called cloud computing, with tremendous implications of how people will store information and so forth. The sum of all of that is what we're doing now. And rather than having me talk about it, I thought it'd be much better to bring my two colleagues who have shown up in matching shirts, matching shoes, Sergey and Larry. One woke up in Russia, one woke up in London, and they dress the same. We should take 1 minute to thank Nikesh, Lorraine, DJ, all the people who put such a tremendous amount of effort to make this all happen, and especially with the evening's activities ahead of us. A phenomenal job, Nikesh and team. Thank you. So rather than having us speak, people have comments or questions. We have microphones on any subject, anything you all care about to discuss. We're happy to answer questions. Okay, we have a question. Unfortunately, you don't have a microphone because Sergey. Okay, here we're working. Oh, here's a microphone over here. Okay, good. Progress.
Hi, I'm Brian McBride from Amazon. I just wondered if you could talk about your thoughts and implications of Yahoo and Microsoft get together.
What are you talking about? Sorry. Test. Oh, yeah. Well, what do you mean, Yahoo, Microsoft?
Sergey, you were traveling.
I was traveling. I actually did. In this ongoing saga, I was surprised to find out when I flew in today that there was some new development that I've yet to be fully briefed on.
By me.
By you. So, Eric, why don't you... I can think of no better time.
Okay. Let's see, a couple of things. There's been rumors that Microsoft's going to do another approach at Yahoo. We've taken a position that the markets are more competitive, creativity is stronger, it's better for consumers if Yahoo remains independent. David Drummond, who's here, wrote, I thought, a pretty persuasive blog, given the history of Microsoft and its behavior, that was a pretty good outcome. And I think we stand by what David has to say. Do you agree, Larry, or have you had a chance to look at it yet?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, good. With us, you never quite know. Let's see, you had a question? Yes, sir.
Hi, it's Marco from Dada. A personal question to each of you. What's the single technological thing that excites you the most today? The one you like the most?
I got this kind of strange thing at home recently. I bought this really big monitor. It's kind of quad HD. It's like 4,000 by 2,000 resolution, and it was very, very hard to get and actually make it work with a computer and whatnot. but I finally have gotten it working, and it's kind of interesting. It makes you it changes how you can work if you actually have really big high resolution display that size. So that's one toy, if you will, that I'm playing with.
You can't really see if you have like windows at the top. You can't really see them because they're too far away.
Well, yeah, but then you drag them to yourself. You do. That's true.
Larry,
Here,
is there,
Larry.
Larry?
That's a hard question. Actually, one of the things I've been really excited about, we've been working hard on Street View, which is now been shown in Europe a little bit and so on. And driving in general, I think, is very, very interesting thing for computers. So one of the things I did, I visited this thing called the Grand Challenge, which was basically, it was a contest for like $5 million for the car that could drive itself the best, with no people inside, by the way. And they're actually amazingly good. They basically simulated a city, and the cars just drove around all day. And the best cars actually drove all day with basically no errors in traffic. So they had human drivers wearing helmets and stuff, driving around with them and hoping the cars wouldn't run into them. But I think the possibilities for some of these technologies are just amazing. There's about 1 million people a year that die in auto-related accidents, and certainly we can do better than that now that we have computers. So for me, it's just seeing things that you didn't think were possible that computers can do, and thinking about what the possibilities of those are.
Thanks a lot.
There's a question over here.
Yes, hi. I was just wondering if you would like to comment about what you're doing on alternative energies.
Sure. So we recently launched this initiative called RE less than C. It's kind of a geeky way of saying that we want renewable energy to be cheaper than coal. And the reason behind this is kind of interesting for us. We had all these data centers that were launching all the time in all parts of the world to serve our users. And they basically use a lot of energy. And so we had people shopping around for electricity and buildings and space and so on. And what they noticed is that basically all the electricity is generated by coal in a wide variety of places. And that's the cheapest energy that we have. And in places like China, of course, that's what they're primarily building, coal-fired plants. And has a lot of implications. It's really a dirty technology, a lot of carbon emissions, even besides it being dirty. We started we wanted to make green data centers. So we said, well, we should really do better than this. And we started talking to all the companies in the space, which there are many. There's a lot of investment. And it's actually very promising. There are many, many technologies in solar and in wind and in geothermal that can really make energy cheaper than we get it now from coal and do it at a scale that's similar to all the energy we use today. So we can imagine making renewable energy that's cheaper than we produce now and doing it at a scale that's as much energy or more energy than we produce today. And that's really about getting people to work on that now rather than 5 years from now. There's a lot of investment in producing expensive green energy, but if you talk to the people who are doing that and say, well, can you make it a lot cheaper? They say, yeah, we can probably do that, but we're going to work on that 5 years from now once we finish the expensive green energy. And what we've been doing is making some investments and hiring people and telling them to start working on that now because the world can't wait for that. So that's, I think, is a really exciting area for us and one that could really be a big thing.
Go ahead.
Kent Nichols with AskANinja.com. Can I get each of you to go on record as to if you're for ninjas or pirates?
I'm for whatever the opposite of Sergey is.
I guess if I had to choose, I'd probably take the Ninja.
Look, this is a serious question. Seriously asked. Are you sure?
No, I'm not certain. What happens after I choose one or the other? Imagining somebody jumps from behind the
Yeah,
stage.
I mean, the ninja could be anywhere, but pirates are about. Mr. Schmidt?
I'm too old.
I see. Thank you.
More questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question. Cenk Serdar from Turkcell, Turkey. You are shown as the best example when it comes to an innovative company, and I had the chance to visit the headquarters last year. I'm not sure about the innovation part, but I envied the environment. It's great. Now my question is, we hear a lot in the news about why Google is innovative, and there are a lot of good things said about the company, but two examples are given the most, which is 20% of people's times are spent on personal projects, which might actually help Google in the future. The second one is 10% of the money is usually spent on what you call the wacky projects, if I remember correctly. Now, my question is, whose idea were those two? Now, the second question is, were there any similar ideas which you weren't able to implement, which you are sorry about? And the third question is, again, in the media, there's a lot of discussion going on about now that you are becoming, or you're growing, you are having problems with some of these implementations. Do you plan to change those, or do you think these are the core values of Google and you want to keep those? Thank you.
Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about the history. I came up with the numbers, but I think the concepts were all shared between all of us. I just decided to quantify them.
Actually, what happened was I didn't believe Sergey, so we were in a management offsite, and Sergey actually stood up and proved mathematically the numbers. And since no one understood the math but Sergey, it was obviously correct.
That is accurate rendition.
I think it's, so there are two rules we have at Google, kind of. One is called the 20% rule. That's for individuals to spend a portion of their time working on, not their main projects, but other projects that are useful to Google that they take the initiative on. And the other is a similar sounding, but that's the 70-20-10 rule. And that's how we divide our overall resources as a company, not just financially, but also headcount and whatnot. And we want to spend 70% of our resources working on our core, which we've generally defined as search and ads, but now probably apps fit into that category as well. 20% of our effort go to adjacent areas. For example, maybe Android is an example of that. And 10% is kind of things that are, completely unrelated. Anything goes. And like renewable energy. Though obviously we use a lot of energy, but it's kind of in the 10% category. And the idea is to strike a balance. There are two ways companies can go. They can get so fragmented they go from doing one thing to 25 different things, and then they're not focused. At the same time, you can become myopic and not try new areas at all where you might do well. You might have great resources and ideas for them. So the idea behind that rule was to kind of set the balance. And I didn't prove the exact numbers, but the fact that we should always maintain, a roughly constant ratio, I did have a mathematical argument for. And that you shouldn't have the 10%, the out there things, dwindle, say, down to 1% as you become a very large company, as I think does happen to large companies often. I think that was pretty important.
Then the other part of the question was the issues that have been written about today about the scale of the company, and are those in discussion?
I think, as we get bigger, every time we double in size, kind of everything changes. Most of the things we're doing don't work anymore, and that's happened to us a number of times already. Things like we're much more global now, so time zones are a huge issue. Like Eric's been yelling that you can't meet with Europeans after noon or so, and those are actually real issues for us. Like we had to.
He means afternoon in the U.S.
U.S. Yeah, sorry.
It was not a reference to siesta.
Yeah. The Europeans are very cranky afternoon.
after lunch.
But we've had, those are real issues. Like we've had to rearrange how we do our meetings and with what people and what times and things like that. And there's just, it sounds kind of trite, but there's 100 issues like that you need to address as the scale changes. And, it's, I think it's always a challenge to keep up with those. You're always, in a sense, you're behind what you need to be doing at any given time around communications and organization and all that. I think we've had a lot of computer systems that have really helped us do that, though. We have something called the project database, which basically contains what everybody's doing. And so anybody can look at a project and you can see who's working on it and what their milestones are and so on. And that's been really helpful. We also have an automated system that makes sure people's reviews get done, their performance reviews. And so they're peer reviews, so they're based on your peers and your managers, and everybody makes written feedback, and the system collects all that together, and there's a process by which it gets reviewed. But I think having a little bit of automation around some of the basic tasks of the company have really helped us scale, but it's always a challenge.
You got a question?
My name is Marc Menasse from Paris. You've been part of a huge revolution, as we did, but in a micro proportion. I want you to know, following to you, what is the next revolution?
Okay, I'll throw out one idea, but my guess is as good as anyone's. Nanotechnology might be a good one. I don't know. Maybe you should ask the ninja.
Larry, the next revolution?
Oh, it's
After
really,
you get finished with all those cars with no drivers in it, are people going to be sitting in the back? with no one in the front seat?
I mean, I think any of the things that are speculated on being the next revolution, biotechnology, nanotechnology, many different areas, any of those could be the next revolution, but generally nobody's working on it. So one of the things I've been trying to do is to get more people working on things that could really matter. So the question I like to ask people is sort of, is the project you're working on going to change the world? And you sort of ask people that question, and I think you end up with some very small percentage of the population, like 0.00001%, that's really working on those things. And so the rate at which we accomplish those changes is very, very slow because of that. And this is the Sergey's point in the large. So how do you get the world allocating 10% of its resources to the sort of wacky things that we're clear if they would work, they would change the world. And that number is 0.001% instead of 10%. And from my standpoint, I think we've got to get more people into engineering and into technology. So that's where we've seen really big changes. We don't all have to farm now because we have technology to do farming. And that's true for many different areas. I mentioned driving already. There's a lot of labor used in driving that doesn't need to be used that way. So you can kind of look at the different areas and say, where can we really make a big impact? And how do we get people to do that? So I think, the quick answer is you can decide which area is going to be the breakthrough by actually working on it.
The other debate that we have all the time, where I'm always the loser, is that Larry and Sergey say, we have all of this money and cash now. We should be taking more risks than we did when we were a startup. So when we were a startup, we were like about to go bankrupt all the time.
Well, 10% of a big company is a lot more risk than 10% of a small company.
Anyway, I always lose this battle. Yes, sir.
My name is Mohammed Hajjassan from Jordan, and Google launches so many different applications and features, and I was just wondering, what sort of criteria do you look at before launching a new application or feature on Google's many sites?
Okay, good question. Yeah, how do we launch new products and features? Typically, the initial ideas are kind of born out of a brainstorm, or somebody puts together a demo, and eventually they'll get a go-ahead to start to build it. Once we've developed it enough, we will typically test it by putting it out to, say, a small percentage of our user base. Certainly for existing products like search, we'll just put it through a series of tests, and we'll measure how much more quickly were people able to find information using this thing. Do they come back more or less often as a result of that? Things like that. And once we're confident that what we've built has a good benefit, then we'll go ahead and launch it.
Go ahead.
Just to continue with your theme of innovation, you've recently had a few high-profile departures from Google. Do you worry that maybe as you've become a bigger company, the people who want to do that 10%, who want to make a real impact in the world, feel like they'll have a better chance of doing it outside Google rather than inside Google?
I think we've had departures recently that have been more highly profiled. But we actually, in overall attrition, when I think about it, we're actually roughly just as we've been all along. And we had, very high-level people leave in the past. I just don't think it got noticed quite as much in the press. But the important part of the question is, can people really feel free to innovate? And we've recently started to have, we have a group of about 5 initiatives that we let run somewhat more independently, kind of just to experiment with other models and also allow people who have a solid track record within Google, once they've demonstrated a success, we say, okay, you're going to do this a little different than we normally do it, but we'll let you have a go at it. Like I said, we have probably about 5 such things going right now. And I think as a result, these people are able to better invent than they would at a separate startup, because here they get a good degree of autonomy plus all the resources that Google can bring to bear. Now, those things are fairly recent, so we have yet to really know their true success, but I'm fairly optimistic.
We should say too, I think that this is a work in progress around corporate structure. So I do think that there's an issue that we have a startup model and we have kind of big company model where there isn't much innovation. We don't have anything in between that's been really successful. And actually, we tried a number of different things. Sergey mentioned we have about 5 things going. Actually, they all kind of have slightly different structures. There's several in contemplation that we're starting to have even slightly different structures than the ones we're running. So I think it's a balance of how you get the compensation right, how milestones based is it, what is the real structure of how you do these things within companies. And we don't really know exactly how to do it yet, but we know we'll keep trying until we get it. And I think it's pretty much an unsolved problem for companies. I think it's a very important one to solve, so that big companies can get a structure that works, or bigger companies can get a structure that work and really produce a lot of innovation and a lot of things that will make a big difference in the world.
Go ahead.
What's the one thing each of you worry about most?
In my case, Larry and Sergey. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Eric and Larry?
Sergey and Eric?
That question was for the two of you. What do you worry the most about?
The thing I worry most about is opportunity cost. I think that we're, have some fairly unique opportunities that not all companies have in terms of some of the resources we have. We have the brand, the financial resources, the technical expertise, things like that. And I worry that we might become a little too myopic and not use that to maximal effect. The fact that we do have the ability to say, scan all of the world's books and make them searchable for everyone in the world. Things like that, those are exciting to me. And I worry that we may not be making other similar bets that we could be making. And instead, and I think, there are many things that other companies can do that I'd like to make sure we leave it for those third-party companies to do, because, if there are plenty of other people capable of doing certain things, there's no reason that we have to do that.
All right.
I think the main thing I worry about is the open internet, basically. I remember even in the early days of Google, we worried that sort of all the information would get locked up in kind of proprietary way, and it would be hard to index and so on. And that hasn't happened, obviously. There's still very many ways that it could happen. For example, when we started Google, it worked pretty well everywhere in the world. I mean, we were just a couple of grad students, and then we were, 10 people or 20 people, and we had several million users, and there were actually many users all around the world. If we were required to pay for good transit, in order to make our service fast, there's no way we could have done that. We couldn't even answer our phone, we didn't have enough people. So some of the proposals I see around, where ISPs and so on want to extract money for good transmission, I think really could really harm that innovation and new companies coming about. I mean, the fact that you can plug sort of one computer in somewhere and just magically it can talk to everyone in the world pretty well. And that's something we take for granted now, but is a tremendously important thing for the world. It's not necessarily going to continue to be that way. So that was one thing. I also think, we really want to preserve open standards too. The reason why the internet works is because it was invented in universities. The standards we have for email and things like that work openly. because they're invented, in universities, and that's why you have spam also, because they could never imagine there'd be bad people on the internet, and so they didn't really think about those issues. But the standards that came about more in companies like instant messaging have been very, very closed. So we've announced for a long time that we'll interoperate with anyone who'll interoperate with us on instant messaging. Amazing. You should be able to instant message anybody, not just the people who happen to be on the same network, just like with email. And we haven't gotten takers from the big companies. And so I think there's still a lot of risk around communications being closed. And that's a great way to make sure those products never get better. So those are the kind of things that I worry about.
Go ahead.
Hi. My name's Jim Brigden. I'm from an agency called The Searchworks. We spent a lot of money with Google last year, about $200 million worth of revenue with Google last year.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of our clients. And there's a lot of agencies in this room. We got a rebate last year of about $14 million from Google, which we reinvested in our people and our technology and our clients. And that's been taken away, all the rebates, as of next year. And I know there's a lot of pain at my agency, and I'm sure there's other agencies here that are hurting because of that. So I just wanted to ask, are you aware of that change in pricing structure? And can you talk me through the reasons behind it? Because my clients are a bit confused. Okay.
This has been a controversial decision within the company. We looked at it from the standpoint of where we thought the value added was and what the total cost structure, and we compared all the various different groups. I'm aware of some of the economic changes, and I understand that it's painful. The theory here is that the market is growing quickly enough that although the percentages are smaller, the aggregate is growing quickly enough that there's enough money to cover expenses and have a good profitability. And we can talk offline about some of the details.
I'd really like that, please.
That's right. But the basic argument was the economic structure had gotten skewed again, and it wasn't a fair playing field, and that's why we had to make the change. And again, very, very complicated argument. Let's see, we had a question over here. Yes, sir.
You spent quite a lot of money on the YouTube acquisition and also on the MySpace deal. What is your plan for monetizing that kind of traffic? On the one side, online video, and on the other hand, user-generated content in general.
One of the most important, in my view, and not as well covered stories in the last year, has been the tremendous growth of YouTube. It's shocking to me how much is going on in video around the world. The growth and so forth at various points has almost put Google in harm's way in terms of our ability to actually run all of Google. The traffic explosion has been so great, and as Larry pointed out earlier, we've managed to actually re-engineer our systems and so forth to handle this traffic. So what's new this year? And the answer is YouTube. So out of that, we have a number of initiatives around advertising that are not what you think. They're not pre-roll or post-roll, which we're beginning to try. So the outlook there is very good, but the tests have to proceed. You guys want to talk a little bit about MySpace?
Well, I was just going to say on YouTube.
We're already in that business. Go ahead.
I was going to say on YouTube too. I think the Google actually ran for a while before we started running advertisements. And then we tried a couple of different things, and then one of them kind of worked out well. I think we're in that same phase on YouTube, and I'm very confident that we'll get revenue from that. But I'm not in a hurry to do it. I want to do it right, and I think that's the attitude we've taken. And also, we told those guys we want to build traffic. You guys are building tons and tons of traffic. That's the most important thing, and we're sure we can monetize it over time. So I think we've been pretty happy with that progress.
If I can just take a moment to step back to the agency fees question, just to add a little more color there. So we sell our advertising principally by auction. Essentially, we have customers. We've done it historically slightly differently depending on the country. But this effort was part of unifying that. We have some customers that use agencies that then will bid on keywords on Google, and some customers will represent themselves directly. Ultimately, to make an auction fair, we need to compare the actual money that we make. I mean, just because if we send money back to the agency, then maybe we should be sending money back to the direct customer, also a comparable percentage. Ultimately, we decided we needed to compare it kind of apples to apples because we didn't want to disadvantage the customer coming us directly versus the one coming in through the agency in terms of how their bids got set in the auction. Now, with this new system, it's not that the agency doesn't get paid at all, but we leave that payment portion to the relationship between the agency and the customer, and that way it's more transparent. That was the thinking behind it. I mean, there's certainly, as Eric mentioned, we're happy to discuss it further. But this wasn't just some kind of scheme for Google to get more money. This was really about how we fairly deal between different customers.
And let's make sure we answer the MySpace question. So we're in the MySpace advertising business. It's gone well. And again, as we're learning as we're learning how to monetize social networking traffic, it will ultimately be much, much better. It's taken us a while, and we said that before. Is that a fair summary, sir? Larry, Sergey? Let's see. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Ramu Yalamanchi from High Five, and I have two questions.
From
Ramu Yalamanchi from High Five.
Yes, hi.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is for Larry. And in thinking about, in getting people to think about problems that matter and working on problems that matter, how do you actually do that for people that are outside of Google? And my second question is for the whole group, and that's what's the single accomplishment that makes you most proud in kind of all the things that have happened over the years?
Yeah, I don't really have a great answer for the outside of Google. It's actually hard even inside of Google. I find pushing people a lot helps. You just really need to tell people, like, why aren't you working on this? Why don't you work on something bigger? Why don't you? And it's just a constant effort. Outside, I've started talking about it more. So I did an interview in Fortune this last month. I've been working with the X Prize to try to define some big challenges for the world. There's also a government-funded group called Grand Challenges for Engineering, which is part of the National Academy of Engineering, where they've defined like 10 areas that would be really great if they were solved. One of them is reverse engineering the brain and things like that. And we went through with a whole bunch of really smart people and tried to define some interesting things for people to work on that would really matter. So I think it's just, just trying to work on it.
Sergey?
Let's see, maybe I should talk about what kinds of things we're most proud of. I think that being able to deliver what I hope you think are excellent products, I don't want to judge them myself, things like search to everyone in the world, well, everyone with an internet connection anyhow, and we're working on broadening the number of people who have internet connections, and it's free. So the most, whatever the president of whichever country or the prime minister, they all probably use Google. I don't know for sure. All of the, no matter how wealthy you are, I use the same search engine as somebody, an orphan in Nigeria might use if they're at the internet. Everyone is able to afford this incredible kind of resource. And the same thing, by the way, is true of Gmail. Everybody's able to afford that kind of great communications tool. So I'm pretty proud that we've been able to not only create great tools, but also deploy them widely to everyone in the world.
I think for me, I'm most proud of just being involved with the internet as a whole. I think everybody here understands the power of the internet. Try to remember when you didn't use the internet and you couldn't rely on it in any way. It's a pretty harsh vision. Yes, sir.
Guy Phillipson, the Chief Executive of the Internet Advertising Bureau. I just want your views on, I guess, keyword search versus display within your company. Keywords has been phenomenal growth. It's huge in the UK, we know that. But broadband, makes online a proper entertainment system, and we can see rich media, video, hence the acquisition of YouTube and so on. And you've got DoubleClick as well, and an ad exchange. And so where does it all fit? And how do you see the ratios working in the future, say over the next 5 years within Google?
We agree with your premise, right? That it's just going to be this amazing platform for advertisers. We don't necessarily know exactly what the products are going to look like on top of that substrate. We know that advertisers want to use more than text, more than video, more than display. They want to be able to think of it as a package, and they want to get it in the right way. We also know that people are doing creatives, and so there are now agencies, many of whom are here in the room, who are doing very interesting things with, for example, gadgets, gadget ads and things like that, click-to-play video ads. So we're part of those experiments. How will it come together? It's pretty obvious to me that display advertising will be a very large business. And again, Google is today not the leader there, but it's going to be a very large business globally for a number of players, simply because people care about images and video and so forth and so on. And the company that can figure out all the various combinations to produce a valuable targeting solution that will target that media is probably going to end up being the winner. You guys agree?
And ultimately, do you see keyword search maxing out, way in the future, and hence?
There's no evidence of that. There may be some limits, but we benefit from the fact that the internet is growing very, very quickly, especially outside the United States. Broadband adoption is growing again very, very quickly, and PCs, Macintoshes, cell phones, all of that. If you think about it, if you assume that the internet only has about 1.3 billion users, and there's on the order of 6.5 billion people on the planet, you're only a quarter penetrated. So what happens when another billion or two people come online?
So raising the audience is actually just going to
Absolutely, and the pie really does get a lot bigger. And we take it for granted here. Everybody here uses it. Everybody here has a mobile phone and so forth. That's not true for a lot of humanity, and it's time to get that fixed.
We should say too, if you do a search for something you're trying to buy, I only get ads maybe 80% of the time, 60% of the time, something like that. That's in the US, which is a really highly developed market. UK obviously is similar. But there's a lot of things that I buy and I search for that I don't get any ads for. And so there's a lot of opportunity there still. And I think our ad systems are really probably optimal for medium-sized advertisers. And for really small advertisers and really big advertisers, there's still a lot of things that need to be done to really create the coverage that can generate conversions and clicks and so on.
Sir, you'll have the honor of the last question.
Thank you very much. My name is Arndt from Germany, and the last question is then a pretty personal question. The incredible success of Google has made you wealthy beyond imagination in a very short amount of time. Has that changed your life to the better or the worse?
Sergey has to spend more time with his monitor. He's the first one who has one, so it takes a long time.
It actually cuts both ways, to be fair. So it probably balances out somewhat neutral. Certainly, I get somewhat bigger and better toys, but they come with me having to do a lot more of the testing and debugging.
You could hire someone to do that for you.
I don't know. I'd feel awkward about that. I think, there are a few lifestyle changes. I've tried to limit some of my lifestyle changes and not change too much. I've certainly seen a lot of people who have great wealth who seem relatively unhappy. And in fact, it's kind of, as you drive through sort of different neighborhoods, you can kind of see and kind of where people are more secluded because they have bigger houses, bigger lots, and they're wealthier. They have less social activities than a lot of the more populated, more urban areas that are typically poorer in the U.S. So I think it requires great care for people who come into sudden wealth, if you will, to avoid those kinds of traps.
Larry?
I was going to say, I think what I mostly feel is just a great sense of responsibility. You have all this resource to use it well and to think about that, and it's been really, I like challenges, so it's been a great challenge, but also not something that I expected to have to do. But we've been spending a lot of time on things like our Google.org efforts, some of the energy things and other things. I've been spending a lot of time in Africa because I feel like I really need to understand that. And so, I've been taking some vacations there and things like that, which has been interesting, but not what I would have thought I was doing, if you asked me 10 years ago. So I think, having that responsibility is a really exciting thing. It causes you to do a lot of things that you might not otherwise do that are good. There's also tremendous challenge and responsibility that you feel about it.
I want to thank Larry and Sergey. Nikesh and I both want to thank Larry and Sergey, who made this special trip just literally to come here for this meeting. So thank you both. Okay.
And if I may just very quickly, I hope you've all been enjoying the conference. I hope you appreciate that as payment. You had to sit here and listen to us torture you with this Q&A for about an hour, but it's free from here on out.
Nikesh, you want to sort of... Okay, thanks everybody.